Yaakov,
Record.
everyone with the midos, the exemplary midos, and that comes from a mother. Torah Simecha means the midos come from a mother. The special midah that she had, the feinkeit for everything, not looking at the bad, looking at the eye toiva that you had in everything, to see the good in everything. Everything that happens was always, you see the good. Beschanan is also, if you take the Beschanan, the Echanan, and you put Noshim, 400, the Noshim and Echanan, women are the ones, if you see the beautiful families from the tefillos of Mrs. Urman, her davening, her caring, her talking, the way she spoke to every person. Eila Dvorim, the Dibur, Becha was, every word was by her, Bechanan. Kamu Beneo, V'Yashua is Vov. Kamu Beneo, Vov, her 6 children, come Asher, validate who she was. Ubala V'Halala. Sure, her husband Benny is waiting. There's such a wife, such a choshev wife she was, such a choshev person she was. Every time I spoke to her, she gave me the best feeling in the world. You felt you're speaking to one of the older generations who understood what it means to respect people, who understood what it means to do the mitzvahs of Hashem from love, from ahava. You know, the whole time now, the family was saying Shema Yisrael with her. It says when the person leaves the world, you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You say that because when you go away from this world, you go away with the Emunah Shalema, Shema Yisrael, the mitzvah. And Shema Yisrael has Raj Ayin and Raj Dalet, 8. Shema Yisrael. In the Torah, there's no pasuk Baruch Shem Kavod Machusoi. And the Mepharshim explained because the Ayin Dalet is already the Baruch Shem. Ayin Dalet means this is a testimony. The biggest testimony there's a Rebbeinu Shloim is to see an Urman family. To see a family like the Urman family, to see such a chashuv family, every one of them, Shmuel, and every one of the families, that you see, the Lohinger family, the Sternbuch family, the Liebesman family, and the Samet family, and the Feldman family, the chashuv, every one of them, the spouses and the children and the grandchildren. We were speaking the other day when, the doctors were saying, and so one of the children told me, Mommy's having so much annoyance to see how all the children are sitting together talking to each other, caring about each other. That's why she's not leaving the world. She's shephing the nachas that the nachas comes from what she put into the children together with Benny. But especially, you saw in every one of the children mirroring her and emulating her in every way, in her ehrlichkeit, a real ehrlich. Like Rosh Hashanah said, there's a lot of frumma people, of us, the Shutzi people, ehrlich people. Ehrlich means that you 100%, you don't do anything for show, you don't do anything, just you do everything. What does the Rebbeinu want from me? That's everything she wanted. Always, every time she asked her Shaila, what do I have to do? What's the Rebbeinu? And that's how she lived her life. Unbelievable. She was Zoicha, the last chasna, right before she was hospitalized, she was by the chasna of the youngest grandchild, Ilana. She was Zoicha to go be by the chasna. I went over by the chasna, I said mazel tov to her, and she came to the Sheva Brachas Friday night still. The Rebbeinu gave her the schus that everyone, she was able to be by every one of her grandchildren's chasnas, from the oldest to the youngest, to Alana. She was zeichet to be there, and they were zeichet to see a grandmother like this woman, to someone that you could look at her. This is how a woman of Klal Yisrael should look like. This is her, in every way, her tznius in action, tznius in everything she did, not showing off anything. And that's how every one of her children are, the same way. And Baruch Hashem, Shmuel, the only son, Baruch Hashem in our Smedish, he's from the Ma'asim and the family, the Spanish doing everything. There's nothing that he can't do for anybody. Anything, anyone needed anything, Shmuel is there to do, there to help. And that's from his parents. The same thing, every one of the children are involved in everything, where everything they're involved in helping and caring. She goes up to Shemayim, she goes back to her Choshev husband, to Benny, all the children. Look, Benny, you left the world, but look at the children after you left. Look how I took care of them. Asisi shlichosi. I took care of the children in every way. In every way they had to be taken care of. Whatever the children needed, she was there to help them. Every one of the children, all the needs, everything, she was there. The same thing for anything that was needed in a Medrash, anything. She was the first one to do anything. When she's leaving this world, she's leaving a big void, a real big void. A void especially for her cultural family. As long as she was around, the mama enough do, and a mother like her, Kama Ein B'Yisrael, the biggest chashivas, the Lord and the Buddha said, she's Ein, a mama. I am a Yiddish mama. That's what she was. I am a Yiddish mama in every meaning of the word. A mama that davens, a mama that cares, a mama that supplies, a mama, everything that could be done, she was there. Our Besmedrash has a big void now, losing a matriarch in the Besmedrash, losing a Mrs. Urman, losing a person. Hashem, she was the youngest of 10 children, from Yitzhak Gershon, Wolf, who had these 10 Choshev children. Many of them lived in our city, Sid Wolf and the Grunwald family, and the children who lived in Levine. Levine was the oldest, so she was the youngest, and we was what they gave for the community, what they gave us, Baruch Hashem. She's left now, she left the youngest of the 10 children. After the Muhammad, Yitzhak Gershon was the one who helped many Rebbes to continue being Rebbes and continue doing the Avodah Kodesh by his giving them chizuk in every way. She left the world, she is the one, the last of these wolf children, the Choshev wolf children, the last she left the world, and the year of Tzei, the year of going Tzei, she left this world, 91. 91 also is the gematria of the Shem Adna, the Shem Havaya. The Shem Adna, Shem Havaya, it's gematria 91. That means she lived a white life of Shem Adna Havaya. Her whole life was being a servant to Hashem, to being a servant to what Hashem wants. And being a servant to Hashem means being a servant to Kol Yisrael. That's what she was. And this is the big 8, the biggest testimony that Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, was her walking in this world, was the biggest 8. Just talking to her. Anyone who spoke to you saw what it means. A Yiddish, with the Edelkeit, with the emus, with the sneers, with the caring, with the doing, and being an Ehrlich woman. She leaves this world, the Weinstein kept her alive with all these weeks, when all the doctors thought she's gone already. But the Weinstein wanted her to see how all the children, not many families can have all the children come together and be together and talk to each other and care about each other. But Hashem, his sermon, you're leaving such a beautiful, beautiful heritage. And they will always remember who you are. Remember who you were and what you are for always. Why don't you help that you should be, he says, Yosher, first for Choshev, for children, family, and for our Besmedrash, for Timanto, for Klal Yisrael. And she always, every time something happened at Yisrael, she used to call me, what could I do? What could I do to help nothing should happen? What could I do that the Chaz Hashem? Every time she was so concerned about Eretz Yisrael, concerned about Klal Yisrael, just like her husband Benny, the one should help that should be Mitzvah for Klal Yisrael, for Eretz Yisrael, and she was like to see Chis Amesim, and Meir V'Yameinu.
Let me have my phone. Give me my phone. This is okay. I think that would be amazing. Okay? Just give me.
Thank you all for coming and joining me and my sisters to give the Kavod Achron to our mother and celebrate her life. And what a life it was. Actually, what the Rebbe just mentioned about the closeness of the yortzites, my wife pointed out to me on the way over here that today was the English date of my father's kavura. My mother was born September 6, 1934 in England, the youngest of 10 children, to Yitzchak Gershon and Chaya Wolf. My mother grew up without much of a formal education due to World War II, which broke out when she was 5 years old. Because of the war, the younger children were sent to live with a Gentile family in a safer area. My mother repeated a story a number of times that the lady of the house where they stayed made them eggs for breakfast on the first day they arrived. And her sister Pearlie, who was 11 or 12 years old at the time, told the lady, even though the pan and utensil were new, they were not able to eat it because the fire was not turned on by a yid. So even though they lacked a formal education, the chinuch and foundations of halacha and Yiddishkeit were instilled in the children by their parents at a very early age. After a home in their neighborhood was leveled by a bomb, my grandparents moved the family to a farm in the countryside, as that was a much safer area to be, as the countryside was not being bombed. And they actually hosted many guests who escaped the Holocaust. She told me there were times when she and her sisters slept in an empty barn just so that the guests could have a bed. And I recall in 2012, when my mother was sitting Shiva for her brother Leonard Wolf, my mother remarked, looking back at her life, how fortunate and lucky her family was while Yidden in Europe were going through the unimaginable conditions and being starved and murdered. Her family had eggs, milk, yogurt, bread, and everything they needed to survive. Her father did not drive, but he owned a car and had a driver take him to the city to work in his textile businesses. After her parents made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael when she was 16, around 1952, my mother was invited by her brother-in-law and sister Mara Minnie Lubavik to live with them in Toronto. My mother spent nearly 2 weeks at sea and decided when she arrived that that would be the last cruise she ever went on. After arriving, she went to find a job. She interviewed for a business owned by a Yid, not from. She was offered a job, but she would have been required to work on Shabbos. My mother told them she would not work on Shabbos. And she got up to leave. The owner called her back after speaking with her for a while and said, "I admire your courage," and gave her as a switchboard operator. My mother actually had experience as a switchboard operator because she worked as one in her father's hotel. One day, Mr. Herman Landau walked in to the office and said to her, after she introduced herself as Marlene Wolf, and said, "If you're a wolf, how can you work here if they make you work on Shabbos?" And she said, "I told them Shabbos wasn't negotiable and they still hired me." In 1954, my uncle Mar Lubavik made my parents shidduch. He met my father when he came to Canada after eating meals at my grandmother's home. My grandmother, Mrs. Chana Urman, at the time, supported herself by cooking meals for immigrants who needed to eat without compromising on kashrus. Later on, my Uncle Meyer and his son-in-law, Rav Yochanan Zweig Shlita, made my sister Esther shidduch as well in 1991. My Uncle Meyer had a real big impact on our family. Because my mother was invited to live with different siblings at different times in her youth, and her parents made Aliyah, and being the youngest and being so close in age to the older nieces and nephews, my mother formed beautiful, close relationships with her nieces and nephews that lasted until her patira yesterday. From the early 1990s until 2020, she lived across the street from her oldest nephew, Rabbi Aaron and Chani Levine. My mother was 7 years older than Aaron and shared a room with him when he was born for a few years while his father was in the British Army in India. We had to compete with them to have my mother for Sudas on Shabbos. She was so close with so many of her nieces and nephews, including her secret admirer that left her flowers every Rosh Chodesh. She was so close to all her siblings. Often when they came from England to visit, they would stay in my parents' home. When her siblings became older and were not well, she visited them regularly and helped out many times, all while holding down a full-time job. Besides her relationship with her own family, she was equally as close to my father's sister's family, the Kopstik family. My parents and my Uncle Percy and Auntie Frances Kopstik were surrogate parents to each other's children. We lived next door to each other on Palm Drive, and our doors and homes were always open to each other's families. My parents and my aunt's families were always proud of each other's children's achievements, including recently when my cousin Yankel Kopstik in Staten Island received smicha. Even in her advanced age, she was so proud of his achievement, and she expressed it to me on more than one occasion recently. The highlight of our relationship with the Kopstiks was the annual 6-week visit every summer, hosting our Bovi Chana and Zeder Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, as well as their sporadic visits during the rest of the year for the family simchas and life's events. To put it into perspective, my mother was in her 20s with 2 young children when my grandmother married Rav Yaakov, and my mother and the Kopstiks started hosting the Gadol Hador. Over the years, as the family grew to 6 children, my mother helped to host Rav Yaakov during the day and sometimes even served as his gabbai. It was quite remarkable to me, observing over the years the diverse people of all types of Yiddishkeit who walked through our door to seek the counsel and guidance of Rav Yaakov. And it was done with privacy and efficiency. My parents didn't make anybody wait. Later on, in his advanced age, my parents made all the Shabbos minyanim in our basement, including Mincha and Shalosh Shudas, when Rav Yaakov would say Divrei Torah to the local neighbors and some of the Avreichim from the Lakewood Kollel. In 1985, when my Bobi Chana was hospitalized, my mother spent 7 months at her bedside, from before Sukkot until 1 month after Pesach, coming home for part of Sukkot. 1 Shabbos and the Siddur. That was it. My father would travel back and forth to work during that time. She never complained or regretted taking care of her mother-in-law. In my mind, this midah of chesed that she performed was in her DNA from her parents, because their tzedakah and gemilas chasadim and achnasas archim and the kavod abrius was legendary. Leading by example, what goes around comes around, and I observed that for the last 4 weeks, how my wife, my sisters, and some of the grandchildren, local and from the USA, took shifts, rarely leaving our mother with any caregivers. My father's cousins, the Menzalewskis, Bass, and Miller families, were also equally as close, and my father considered them his sisters, and we called them all by their pronouns, aunt and uncle. My mother continued to visit our Auntie Helen Menzalewski, Shevfur Shalema, until she was no longer able to go, during the winter when she was diagnosed. My mother's pasuk at the end of Shemini Esrei is Matavu Elecha Yaakov Mishkan Esach Yisrael. We Urman children were so fortunate to have been raised by our parents in a home based on Torah values, Avodah, and Gemilas Chesed. Torah, besides what I mentioned previously about Rav Yaakov, my father himself was an accomplished Talmid Chacham. My mother never complained about my father's form on the dining room table from Sunday to Friday. My mother was proud of my father's smicha that he received from Rabbi Price Zatzal, and even more proud of my father's modesty. And even though he knew halacha, my parents never made a move without consulting Rav Yaakov. We had a rotary wall phone in our kitchen that was originally installed there just to be a direct line to Bubi and Zeta and Muncie. They didn't give out the number. We were really fortunate to have access to the Gadol Hador almost instantly to ask shilos and halacha, hashkafa, and practical day-to-day advice. Regarding Avodah, the original shul building connected to the room we are in right now is built on the 2 lots that were supposed to be the 2 lots where the Urmans and Kopstiks were going to build their homes. That my grandmother, Mrs. Urman Kamenetsky, had purchased for them. But they really needed a place to build a shul, so my father convinced his mother to sell, and he found 2 other lots on Palm Drive. Even more in Avodah, my mother was a tower of support to my father to allow him to put many hours of his time and financial resources to start Camp Israel and then Camp Aguda, together with his good friend Rav Moshe Nussbaum and his wife Chaya. And I do not think the campers today in camp and the staff realize or recognize the foundations that were laid out by these 2 individuals and their wives to be the beginning of what Camp Aguda is today. And that continued after my father and Rav Moshe Nussbaum handed over the reins to the next generation to continue building on what they started. They just made it better. And Mommy, 4 of your great-grandchildren just enjoyed a phenomenal season in camp. I want to add that my mother asked me on Monday morning, her first Monday in the emergency room, to give money for a camp canteen to her great-grandchildren, and she was always thinking of others, even in the most difficult times. Gemilas Chesed, my parents always had an open home, and they both counseled many people that needed emotional support, advice, or when they were able to, give financial support of their own. I remember them hosting for extended stays some nieces looking for shidduchim. And I remember the many Sheva brachas my parents hosted. All this was only accomplished because of the solid marriage my parents had. In 1974, when my father did find a new parnasa with the help of Uncle Meyer and Auntie Minnie Lubavik and Uncle Fred and Auntie Avril Greenwood, my parents started our family business at their kitchen table with a typewriter, a piece of carbon paper, and 2 pieces of Superchem stationery. And my mother was the CFO and office manager for 52 years. Watching my parents work together for so many years, we children rarely ever saw them argue. Their marriage was based on love, respect, and care for each other's well-being. After my father's patira, my mother continued to work without a thought of ever retiring. My mother never let age stop her, emailing statements, paying bills online, and various other forms of electronic banking. My mother was honest, efficient, and had integrity until her last day at work on Friday, June the 19th. When filters came out for smartphones, she asked me if she should get one. I told her, Mommy, I don't think they had you in mind. I think they had me in mind. My mother was also very grateful to her brother Sidney Wolf for getting my father a car and helping him when my mother was struggling. And his care for my mother continued after my father's patira, and he would invite he would invite my mother to join him and my Auntie Pearlie for dinner at the restaurants frequently. She was extremely close to her oldest sister, Auntie Tina, and all her children. I often tell my children to be nice to their youngest sister because Booby took care of all her older siblings. Mommy, not only were you the best mother I ever could have had, but also the best boss, co-worker, and neighbor. After Daddy's patira, when we wanted to move closer to the Aguda, we knew we found the perfect lot. You were insistent that we not live next door to you or right across the street from you, as you did not want to know our comings and goings, and you did not want us to know your comings and goings. So we found a lot 3 doors away where the sidewalk started at our driveway and ended by your driveway. When our children were little, they were always able to come visit safely without having to walk on the street and pick up your Erev Shabbos treats. Your salad, your cookies, your kishka, and all other treats you gave us that we continued enjoying over the last 25 years. Now, we will never forget, Mommy, we will never forget the trip of a lifetime in February 2023, when we had the schus to take you to Israel to your parents' kvarim on Har Menuchos. Your tefillos to Hashem, to your parents' kvarim on Har Menuchos, your tefillos to Hashem, your request to your parents to be a militza yosher were answered. You were so excited to see your married grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces and nephews, and cousins. I remember the energy you had to run up 5 flights of stairs shortly after landing in Ben Gurion to visit your nephew Yitzi Wolf in Bnei Brak. I needed 3 Red Bulls just to get back to drive to Yerushalayim afterwards. As well as the beautiful day we had, spending the day visiting Rabbi Mrs. Haki Heller in Ramat Beit Shemesh, then on to Netanya for lunch overlooking the Mediterranean with the 2 David Wolf families, and then back to Ula for a proper English dinner at your nephew Akiva Tager and family. What is fascinating to us was your relationships you created with your 4 daughters you were zeicha to see, from your 6 children, 47 grandchildren, 180 great-grandchildren, and 5 great-great-grandchildren. You knew all of them by first name and last name, and they knew you as Bobby Urman. Everyone got a birthday card from you. Once married, you switched that to anniversary cards. With these amount of cards you purchased on a regular 3-month intervals, it's no wonder that the clerk in Dollarama questioned you if these cards were for resale, thinking you had a store of your own. You literally pushed yourself with your last ounce of strength and Herculean efforts 5 weeks ago to come to your youngest grandchild, Alana and Dovi's wedding, and host Sheva brachos for her on Friday night. And how you waited, Mommy, how you waited Erev Shabbos. You found out in the end of December, Shabbos came early, you found out half hour before Shabbos that what your diagnosis was, and you didn't want to tell anyone, including me, who you ate with Friday night. You didn't let on anything about how sick you were. You waited till after Shabbos to tell us. We want to thank the Rav Lowy, the ICU staff at Mount Sinai, Dr. Hogan from Princess Margaret, Joanne Lang, for literally being our private nurse and consultant, spending many hours with us on her days off and on her days on, when she wasn't off, after working a whole night, spending hours with us in the hospital. Thanking you also to my close friend for almost 50 years, Chaim and Yocheved Weinberger. Besides our family's friendships, you were there for us in person at Mount Sinai, and you had a big hand in giving us another 4 weeks with our mother. And thank you to Shelley for holding our hands throughout the most difficult time and working along with Chaim and Joanne, keeping my mother alive for the last 4 weeks. And because you never get thanked, Meir Botnick, Shai Botnick, thank you also for letting your wife do all this holy work that she does. And thank you to all those who are davening for my mother. My mother even mentioned to my sister-in-law, when she told her, I'm davening for you, my mother answered it, I have an army of people davening for me. As well, thank you to all our friends and relatives for all the beautiful messages that you wrote to us and for offering meals and they arranged to send in. Literally within minutes of the news of my mother's Batira. Mommy, Shani and I will miss you, walking you back home after Shabbos Sudas and B'li we will get that railing installed. We ask you, Mechila, if we ever did not give you the proper cover that you deserved, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be Mekayim Kibbutz. All you ever wanted was that there should be shalom among all us siblings. We believe you held on the last 4 weeks because you were getting such nachas from being there around the clock. And Shani and I had this chus to spend 3 of the last 4 Shabbosim with you. After the original prognosis from the doctors, we didn't think we'd even get to spend the first Shabbos with you. I know that there is so much more to say. My nephew Moshe Lomich posted on our family chat a fascinating 40-plus interview you had with my mother. He made with my mother not long ago about her fascinating life. I mean, as your final chapter in the Yitzchak Gershon and Chaya Wolf regal lineage, please be a Melech Yasher for us children and your entire mishpacha, and for the entire Kahal Agudas Yisrael that you and Daddy were so much a part of, and the Kehillah that loved you back so much.
It's a difficult day for me today, and for our whole Kehillah here. My mother-in-law was such a special person, always caring for the family. You know, her name was Matl, and Matl, you can say Matl, she was Matl Shalom. She tried very hard that there should be Shalom in the whole mishpacha, and succeeded in that. She was tremendous in it being Matl Shalom, and always cared about all of Klal Yisrael. She always, her davening was so sincere. I remember seeing her siddur. She had names of many people who she would daven for. She was just unbelievable with her davening every day, saying lots of tehillim, caring for people, all kinds of people, Toronto people, people all over the world, people in Eretz Yisrael. She was just outstanding. On a personal note, she did a tremendous thing for me, which I'll never ever forget. When I was married just a short while, my parents, Aleim Hashem, had no car. We lived in New York, but here we need a car, and she encouraged me, and really encouraged me a lot to learn how to drive. I think she even gave me some lessons. I'm not sure if I remember that correctly, but she really pushed me to get a driver's license, and 100% of the fact that I have my job today is thanks to her, because she encouraged me and urged me to learn how to drive. I want to say over a Meridic story that happened with her by the beginning of COVID 6 years ago. We were all stuck in our houses by ourselves, including her. She was by herself. And after the storm, someone asked her, how did you manage? How did you manage being by yourself by the Seder? How did you do that? So she says, I wasn't alone. I was with Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinemann. I had his Agada, and I did the whole Seder through Zagada, and she finished her Seder somewhere between, I think, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So she was mamish davuk in Torah V'yira, always wanting her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to go in the derech HaTorah V'yira, always encouraging with great words. She was also a murdig of support for Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal. Remember, Rabbi Yaakov used to tell me many times, and she, my mother-in-law, she was Mizaka, Rabbi Yaakov himself, Zatzal, to learn she did all that enabling to make it very possible for Rabbi Yaakov to have menucha, and she was always very encouraging. And Mashver al Vashalom, he used to, for every little thing, and they both went along together. Every little thing, any important thing, he would call Rabbi Yaakov, that's how, and he would say, I have to speak to the Rav. That's how he called Rabbi Yaakov. I have to speak to the Rav. And it was always with the support of my mother-in-law. And she was just an outstanding person in caring Israel. And with davening that she should be Melitza Yeshara for her whole mishpacha, and for the Aguda of Toronto, and for Toronto itself, and for all of Klal Yisrael. U'macha Hashem Elokim dimami al kol panim. Amen.
Shlomo Ent.
We're now in the Shavua Shechabo Tisha B'Av, and a couple of meaningful things relating to Tisha B'Av that I think are very appropriate for my mother-in-law, Irene Kaparis Mishkava. Tisha B'Av is called a Moed. It's a strange thing that we, even to the extent that we don't say Tafnan on Tisha B'Av. So there's a couple of points. It's brought down in Sfarim that the concept of Moed means a chibur, a connection. Oel Moed, v'noadati l'cha shama. That when we're in a state of profound mourning for somebody, that's a testament to our connection, and it's an actual act of connecting with them. And there couldn't be anybody that's more appropriate to my mother-in-law, her connections with people, her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces and nephews, Cain Yirbu, cousins. I always struggled to get my head around it. How could somebody at such an advanced age, or at any age, be able to remember, to be able to so concerned about details about Cain Yirbu, hundreds of people? How could they keep it in their minds? It really had. She was obviously a very intelligent person, but it was really out of concern. When something's meaningful to you, that's what she lived for. Her life was concern about other people. She didn't draw attention to herself. She gave attention to other people out of her concern. Optimism to repair things. Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. And my mother-in-law led everybody with her optimism. She went through difficult times, as was mentioned, during World War II and other things. And the way she feared, she led people, she led her family through this optimism. There's a wonderful line that it's actually, you could see that many of our great ones, when they wrote responsa, when they wrote shuvas, when they wrote letters during this time, they would start their letter with the little line, Bein HaMitzarim, Yizrach Or La Yesharim, that this time of year, the light should shine for the Yesharim. My mother-in-law was a Yeshara. She was a person, not in a simple way, not in a simplistic way, but in an intelligent, thoughtful, caring way where people listened to what she said, where every word counted, every word was listened to. She should be a Melitza Yosher, Macha Hashem Dimo Mal Kopanim.
Yitzhi Shleimach.
There's a lot to say about Bubi. Whatever we say isn't enough. Her davening, her emunah pshuta, her connection with Shabbos Kodesh, her simple lifestyle and pashtus, very, very asurudic person, her sameach bechelkai, her sterling midas, oyev shalom v'roidev shalom, and much more. It's impossible to speak about all these things, so I'd like to take the opportunity to speak about two nekudas. Everybody knows the well-known Mishnah in Avos. Mishnah says, and the Mishnah lists a bunch of things. Rabbi Lezer says Ayin Tov, Rabbi Yeshua says Chaver Tov, Rabbi Yossi says Shachen Tov, Rabbi Shimon says Areis HaNoiled, and Rabbi Lezer, the last says Leiv Tov. And the Mishnah says, Amar Lehem Re'ani is Tivri Rabbi Lezer ben Aroch Midivrechem Shebeklal Dvar of Divrechem. The highest darg is the Leiv Tov. Says Rabbeinu Yoino, Nira Lefarish, Ki Leiv Tov Ratzaloymer Midas HaRatzoin, Zehu Hasavlan She'enek Saruach, the patient and easygoing person, Umisrachek Mimidas Akas Umeshev Iman Arach, never gets angry and always speaks with gentleness. Af Ki Yasli Dover Ro Yispaleyu Ve'emar Befiu, even when they're wronged, they're soivelit without a bitter response. Firtes Rabbeinu Yoino Ki Chikoim Amtakim V'kulam Achmadim. This was Bubi. She'enek Saruach Midas Asavlim Ve'enek Saruach. She was always soivel everything, every situation with Yishuv Adas. She was Manarach. I don't remember ever getting angry, raising her voice, and she always spoke with such gentleness and with calmness. Yasu loy dover ra yisbeleyu ve'ein mar befiu. She never complained. She was always upbeat, positive, made a positive environment. Her positivity was contagious. She made everybody around her feel so positive, and she was always so cheerful. Even in the end, when she was in pain, it was always positive, never complaining. Like Rabbeinu Yona's Messiah, ki chikoim amtakim v'chulam achmadim, sweet, with endless sweetness. If I may say, she was the true oyser v'toim bala. This was also the essence of Zayda, upbeat with a joke, made everyone around him feel comfortable, and he was always in good spirits. On a different note, on behalf of the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren, I would like to say how everyone felt this unique individual connection with Bubi, almost as if they were the only grandchild. She held a cheshbon of everyone at all times on a very individual level. She made the effort to participate in simchas, bar mitzvahs, chasanas, brisim, and even a pinyan ben of a great-great-grandchild, making each grandchild feel special. Not only did she participate, but she also made everyone feel that she was so happy to come. She was happy to share in everyone's milestones with them, and she even sent every single grandchild and great-grandchild on their birthday a handwritten postcard with a gift, and it was with a postcard of the year of their birthday. This really meant a lot to everybody. Bubi, we all really felt so close to you. She took a lot of pride in her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and built them with her imun and belief in everyone's mailis and koiches. And she was very, very supportive. The long Friday night Sudas we spent with her and with Zayda, and then when he passed away, with her alone, will be etched in our minds forever. Such meaningful conversation about Torah mitzvahs, Zaydi Yaakov, Zaydi Yitzchak Gershon, and much, much more. She carried with her the teachings of Zayda and the Elta Zaydas. And she was a true woman of the past with special Farzeitishkeit. We learned so much from you. Bubi, you are a real role model for everyone, everything you did. And you really taught us what family is and means. And we hope to be able to emulate this Bezer Ampin at least. As he always used to say with such compassion about Zayda, that he should be a good debater, now we stand here and we say to you, Bubi, you be. A good debater for your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Baruch Nisu Gashmis, all of which you knew and you know all our needs. On behalf of my parents, I would like to take the opportunity to give Akar Satov, even though Shmuel already said it, but as is known from the Abu Raham, we have a special Moedim Derabanan. Why do we have a Moedim Derabanan? When you say thank you, you don't send a shliach to say thank you. It's a thank you. So on behalf of my parents and my own siblings, I want to give a special thank you to Mount Sinai staff who took such good care of Bobby, and he was so respectful. And the special Akar Satayv to Chaim Weinberg, Mr. Shelley Bodnick, and Joanne Lang for their continuous Mesiras Nefesh, always available 24 hours. May Hashem repay them with only simchas and nachas and bracha v'atzlacha.
Mishy Libus.
There's really a lot to say, but I'm going to be very brief. Billy wouldn't want it any other way. She's always concerned about everyone's tircha. A week and a half ago, I spent Shabbos in the hospital with her. And I was sitting there. I was thinking, like, what is something that really can, tight shop Billy? And I was thinking that the Mishnah Nava says that the Shlosh Ksarim, Rishim and Eimer, Shlosh Ksarim, Keser Terver, Keser Kluna, and Keser Malchus. So these three Ksarim definitely apply to Bobby. Keser Terver, I remember when just a short point when Zayda was nifter, she didn't want his farm to be removed. She said, people come to the house, I want them to learn this house, I want this to remain a bias Molei Torah. Shas is this, it should stay here. Eventually, over years, when not so many people were sitting in the house, she allowed people to start taking some of this farm. But initially, she said, people come here, they should have farm to learn. I want there always to be Torah in this house. Keser Kuhuna, her avoida, was unbelievable. Her davening, would come to visit. There's time to daven mincha. She would daven mincha. She would stop everything, as many others have mentioned already. Keser Malchus, I think, represents the concern and achrayas for everyone. As many people mentioned, I would speak to her and she would always be concerned. There's this cousin, this relative, this other person. We talk about it and she'd say, oh yeah, I think we have to daven for them, they need a Yeshua, I wish I could help them. There's always people who are on her mind that she was concerned with. But the Mishnah really ends like this. It says, V'keser shem tov arlag gaben. And I think that is really the nekuda that touches up Hobi. I'd go to her house, her phone would ring incessantly. There were hundreds of people probably calling her to speak to her. For Eitzes just to speak to her, she had this thing that there's a Keser Shem Tov, everyone wanted a relationship with her. There's so many people from the shul, people, neighbors, everyone wanted this thing. We do find this concept of Keser Shem Tov in Kehelas. The pasuk says, "Tov, Shem Tov, Mishanim Tov." Miyam Amavis Miyam Valdai. The Farshim say, what's Tov, Shem Tov, Mishanim Tov? Tov, Shem Tov, Mishanim Tov is that the Shem Tov that a person has is much more valuable than any possessions. But the pasuk continues and says, that the person who has a Shem Tov, the Yom HaMavis is a better day than a Yom Valdai. Rabbi, it's going back to Shemaim. For her, it's a better day than Yom Valdai. For us, it is tremendously difficult. Rabbi, please be a Shar for all of us. And with that, I'm going to end.
Yaakov, come. It says in the Kuzari, Kuzari, the Melech Kuzar asked the Chacham, he said, what is a chassid? And he described the person that's perfectly balanced, everything's balanced. That's a chassid. So the Melech Kuzar says, a chassid, that's a Moshe. And the Chacham said, Hainu same thing, a Chacham is Moshe. I think that describes Bubby. She was an extremely balanced person, always even keel. Someone a week and a half ago told me how Mrs. Urman was always so regal. And that was part of her, the person that she was. She was very principled. As mentioned earlier, the story that when she first came to Toronto, and obviously what happened, and she was hired, and she was working Shabbos, so she didn't left out is that when Herman Landau came in, and Herman Landau said, you're a wolf? I said, Shabbos. And she said, I'm working Shabbos. He said, you got guts. She got it from her father. As I said, her father stood, so much of the Shevis HaPleita, her father stood on their feet. He helped so much of them, even though she only had 1 year of education, because they're moving around. But the night she got the principles together with her siblings. But she didn't take the Tuvla Nafsha. She never took credit. She did what needed to be done. Always throughout decades, did what needed to be done. When, as mentioned previously, Gan Yisrael and the first iteration of Camp Aguda. So they didn't have a kitchen in the very beginning. The first few years, she would go up there regularly to wash the dishes, to take care of the kitchen, because they didn't have anything at that point in time. Similarly, as mentioned, she would go down to Muncie. There was a time for 7 months, right? For every week, she said she would be going down to Muncie. You got to do what you got to do. And family, you travel across the earth for. After her husband was nifter, I never wasn't able to meet him, but after his nifter, she soldiered on for 28 years, even keel. Her clear blue eyes, she looked at you or looked past you. Her poise. But at the same time, she did appreciate the family legacy. About a year ago, I mentioned to her, the Holocaust Center by the JCC, maybe they should interview her. And to the surprise of many, she said she agreed. It didn't happen, unfortunately, but she agreed. She did feel that she realized that she was the last from this Chashuv Wolf family and the great legacy of the Wolf family, and for not just her own descendants, for all her siblings' descendants, hundreds, that she was the last of the chain. And she would certainly want it to keep that way. The whole family, wherever they are, whoever they are, these times the bonds could go drift off or go stronger. Finally, in the last few weeks, as mentioned, there was a few times that the doctor said last week, Monday, the doctor said that it's in God's hands. He couldn't explain it. And I think it was about, even more recently, around Friday it was, something like that. One of the doctors says, like, it makes no sense. Right? That it was a case of she was barely getting nutrition, barely getting her body was breaking down. All the machines in the world, it's not Yechia Adam. It's what she was literally, and she embodied. And I think that'll be, as she goes up now, as she leaves us now, she would what that represents, and hopefully that would take it all with us. That a case of a person can have nothing and survive. The Shem wants you to survive, survive. Should she send?
When I think about Bubby, the first thing that comes to mind is just what a classy lady she was. She carried herself with such class, warmth, grace, and she always had a beautiful smile, a kind word, and a way of making every person she met feel important. You could tell so much about a person's life by the people they leave behind. If you look around today, it's clear how many lives Bubby touched. She had so many close friends, so many people who loved her. One of the things everyone knew about Bubby was that she never forgot a birthday. It wasn't because she had an incredible memory. It was because she wanted every person to know that someone remembered them and that someone cared about them. Family was everything to her. She made every effort to be present for all of our lives. Whether it was a simcha, a school play, a chumash party, any special occasion, Bubby always wanted to be there, and she was always there. If you stopped by her house on Erev Shabbos, you were never the only visitor. It was like a revolving door of family and friends coming to wish her a good Shabbos, to spend a few minutes with her, or simply to be in her company. If someone wasn't there, the phone was ringing. For the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a visit was incomplete without Bubby offering chocolate, cookies, or something. It was a simple gesture, but somehow she made every child feel like they were the only person in the room. One thing that defined Bubby was her incredible emunah and bitachon. Life brought her challenges, but she knew how to adapt with strength, dignity, and unwavering faith. She accepted what Hashem gave her and found a way to move forward. My mother often speaks about how remarkable Bubby was right after Zeta passed away at such a young age. She had to face unimaginable loss while also taking on responsibilities she never expected, including the business and everything that came with it. Yet somehow she adapted. She didn't allow hardship to define her. She met life's challenges with resilience, quiet strength, and trust in Hashem. My mother remembers the first Hanukkah. After Zeta passed away, Bubby called and asked if she could come over. And then she asked, "Do you mind if I come late?" Later she explained why she asked that. She knew that first Hanukkah would be very difficult for her. She did not want to be alone. She wanted to leave the house there after she left. She also knew that we Samites weren't exactly the earliest people, so she knew she could come later without feeling like she was imposing on anyone. She never wanted to be in a position. That was Bubby. Even while carrying her own pain, she was always thinking about everyone else. She was always considerate, always thoughtful, and never ever wanted to be a burden. When Bubby was told she needed chemo, her first reaction wasn't about how difficult it was on her. It was, that would be a very big burden to my kids. How could I do that? When I was younger, Bubby had a Sunday afternoon tradition where she took some of the older boy cousins out for pizza and bowling. She did it a couple of times. Then we all went back to their house and just spent time together with her there. I personally happened to be in that nowhere land where I was too young for the older boys, but I was too old for the older ones. There were a lot of girl cousins around me, but that was not a good option. So Bubby knew, she understood. I was only 6 years old, but she knew that it would mean the world for me to be included with the older boys, and she made sure I was. That was Bubby. She noticed people. One memory that always amazed me was how well Bubby knew every one of us. There were a lot of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, as it's been mentioned. When I went away to yeshiva, I thought I should introduce myself every time I called to wish her. Like, how she can remember all of us? So when I called to wish her good Shabbos, I used to start off and say, "Hi, Bubby, it's Shimshi." After a few weeks, she stopped me and said, "I know who you are." And she did. Till recently, I could call her up on any phone. I could call from my work phone or anywhere. Just by the sound of the voice, she knew me. But it wasn't just me. She knew every one of her children, her grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She knew about us. She knew what we were doing, what was up in our lives, and she took a tremendous amount of interest in it. And everything. Chazal teaches that that there are people who may not live many years, but because of what they accomplish, that they have fulfilling lives, they're considered that they have a full life. Bubby was blessed with arichas yom in the literal sense, but she also had this where her whole life was so meaningful, and she was so kind, and it was all about her family. She didn't just live a long life, she thrived. She really, really loved that. She embraced every stage of life with positivity. And many people, when they get older, they slow down, they become discouraged, but Bubby always appreciated every bracha. She'd always say Baruch Hashem. Every simcha she went to, she would say for simchas, and she was so happy to be there. And this is the legacy Bubby leaves behind. Not just a life, but a life filled with kindness, emunah, bitachon, and she should be a militza yeshara for all of us.
Binyamin. There was a lot that was said already about Bubby. I could just add in a few of my own personal memories that I have. I was able to grow up just a few doors down from her. Whenever I read about or heard about the Queen of England, for some reason I always had the most of Bubby. I don't know why.
That was, growing up. And then I got older, I realized, because I've heard many times from my shver, Maricham Yishlita, you say, Davni Kil Hashem Hamducha Meishal Ba'agayim. There's a Meishal and there's a Melech. What's the difference between a Meishal and a Melech? A Meishal is someone who rules his country. He puts fear, he puts aim on his subjects, and that's what makes him in charge, the ruler. A Melech is someone who has Nidivus Alev. He cares about other people, he's concerned about other people. That's real Melech, that's Malchus. Babi was someone who had this midah of Malchus, that was her whole life. She cared about everybody, she thought about everybody. Everybody was always on her mind. I remember a few times I was zeicha to go along with her. She had to visit various of her grandchildren in the hospital who were there for different reasons, and she would come along with a card, and she would come along with some presents, she would come along with some food, and it was never about the presents and the food, it was always about, but she came, she showed that she cares, she just, her yisha b'das, her demeanor overshadowed everything else, and she just had this midah of malchus that she just showed that she cared about other people. Everything else that she did was tough, just the way that she would reach out to people, she was always thinking about other people, she was always talking about other people that she cared about. That was one midah that she had. She would take other people, even people who were younger than her who needed help. She had Bria Sagaf until her last days. She would, people younger than her, she would be concerned about them. She would take care of them. She would take them to where they needed to go. The way she would prepare for Shabbos, she would prepare a lot of food to make sure everybody would have it, because she knew that this was their Einik Shabbos, and she would make sure that everyone had it. She would always, my father mentioned before that she grew up during the war years. She spent the war years in the countryside in England, and she would always tell us how, a few hundred miles away, people were starving, people were getting killed, and we had chicken, we had eggs, we had vegetables, we had everything we need, Baruch Hashem. And something hit me on the way here that, this is most aspect that we can learn. The world is at war, the world is at rage, and we have our chicken, we have our eggs, we have our vegetables, we have Torah, we have tefillah, we have mitzvahs. That's all we need. We have those, and we attach ourselves to them. She had a real chavivas for Torah mitzvahs and for tefillah, like the Rav and many other people have mentioned. That's all we need in a world that's at rage, and everything she did was with the Yishuv Das. She had a real chashivah for Torah mitzvah, tefillah mitzvahs, and I was wondering to myself, my wife kept pushing me, I should come last month, I should come, and I kept thinking to myself, she's not going to want me to leave Yeshiva in the middle of this month to come, and just the last few days of this month, I think, she managed to hold herself until that point. But also, yesterday in the hospital, I was like to have gotten her just after the Ptira, and everybody was saying how, she was like to a good life. This is what Chazal mean about the Chavos always tells us in Shar B'Tachan, about B'Tachan, someone who has B'Tachan gets the schar of the B'Tachan, Adam Hazet and Adam Haba. And we were like to see a keem of this, because Babi was someone who had a tshuva B'Tachan, she was always B'Minuchas Nefesh, always had Yishuv Das. You never ever saw her get flustered. Never saw her ba'atzvah. She was always happy. She was always upbeat. And I remember during COVID, I was like to see her a few times. I saw her from afar, from a distance. But she was always b'yishuv das. She never got worried. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't. She wasn't. She didn't. Nothing scared her. Nothing worried her. I think COVID was announced. I think it was became official on like a Monday or Tuesday. And on Wednesday, she had to go to the bank, and she's like, I put on a mask, I put on my gloves, and I went to the bank. I made my deposit. She wasn't worried. She didn't, she just, nothing was going to convince her. She had this. She knew, I guess. She knew just that, she had betachin, and she felt that she could do it. I guess she had a very high darga betachin that we did. She wasn't worried about these things. There's many other memories I could speak about. Just time is short. What's it called? I remember that just things like this on my head.
Roimim Amsei Menucha Nechaya Al Kanfei HaShechina Ma'alois Kedaishim Tahirim Kizai HaKiyamatirim Es Nishmas Atlobus Mitzakeshay Shalachal Yailama Ba'avushach Mispal Miyadas Koras Nishmasa Gan Eden Tehei Menuchasa Lochein Balorachamim Yasti Be'ab Seif Seknafav Li'aylamim Yitzrah Chayim Es Nishmasa Adonai Chalasa V'sanuach v'shalayim Al Shkava v'noima Amen.
The current place of the Beis HaChaim of the suspension of Luz Yisrael should take place at 68 Charles Wood. Gathering will take place Tuesday tonight, Nechemah at 8:45. Wednesday, Shabbos at 7, and Mincha at 6 o'clock. Thursday, Maariv only at 11:35. Friday, Shabbos will be at 7, and Mincha at 2 o'clock. On Tisha B'Av, visiting hours will be visiting hours will be 3 and 5. And 7, and to allow the Avelim to go up first for those members.
Dave. How are they related to Menzelewski? What? How are they related to Menzelewski? You know? Cousins? Massive family. Yeah. No, he can't. Well, he probably said exactly how many there were. No.
Reselling.
What?
Not the cards, or resale.
Resale, that's cute.
It's a Dollarama.
Very cute. Go ahead.
This on video?
Yeah. But
Rob on video?
no, he called. The Rob was originally on video. It was audio. Oh, Heinrich. This nice. Big meeting tonight, right? Yeah, I know. Yes, live. You bringing a helmet? Yeah, Dave. Normally, it would be I'd be able to put him on video, a hologram like the Sutton did by the internet or the accent. wrong with that? I don't know. Something chopped up. Something got chopped. Either the telephone wire. There's no. No. We managed. I got it. It was inconsistent. Just the signal's inconsistent. So to deliver video was a lot more. Go to stream did anyway. I know you have to go all the way around because of what happens there. Okay, good afternoon. This is Akiva Balter. No, we're okay. I'm going to go now. They're walking down now, right? I'm going to the Feld. This is Akiva Balter for. Thank you all for joining this afternoon for the levaya for Kavod Achron from Mrs. Marlene Urman. I would ask at this time your indulgence for family who's on who may want to see or hear to see the actual kvura from the Feld. It'll take place in approximately 40 minutes, but I will be going outside to show the levaya down the street. Thank you.